Randy Fahrbach. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
It's great, gentlemen. It's great to see you. It's been a while.
I
It
know.
has been. Yep.
I was trying to remember like how long ago we met each other, and I think the year was 2016, which 6 years ago seems like a lot, but also
I know.
seems like very little at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it was at the Estovere retreat from St. John of Arc
In Prescott.
in Prescott,
Prescott,
and now
where
you
I live now.
in Prescott.
Is that when it started, Randy? Where you're like, I can see myself here.
Yeah, I told my wife they have mountains. It's cool. There's pine forests.
See, that's the thing that a lot of people don't know about Arizona is that it's not just desert. Like you drive 2 hours north of Phoenix,
Mhm.
and the scenery starts changing to these pine trees in mountains. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And grassland. There's grassland just a mile from our house where there's like pronghorn, which people mostly think of as antelope. So
Mhm.
we see them and deer and all kinds of stuff. So it's fun.
It's beautiful.
Amazing.
I love it up there. We go up there pretty regularly to just escape the heat.
Hmm.
Um, it, it's amazing that you can get to like a body of water, so close to the desert, and we just like to escape. Prescott or what's the other one we go to a lot?
Patient.
Payson. Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Payson is also beautiful.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, so we met you at the retreat, and I remember very vividly how you were telling your story about your conversion and all that stuff. But I'm not gonna tell it because I don't want to butcher it. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to the church and maybe an introduction about what we're going to talk in this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'd always been a spiritual explorer, and before I got sober in 1998, and then met my wife a little bit later, I kind of explored a lot of crazy things, and so God, in His wisdom, I was 18 months sober, and I met my wife, who was a beach volleyball player. My sister was a beach volleyball player, so she thought that was a good community that I could meet someone in, and so I met my future wife, and I mean, just through circumstances, we kept running into each other, and finally asked her out to. I was singing in the Messiah Santa Barbara Choral Society, and I asked her to come listen to me, and so she did, and that was one of our first dates. And so, but the interesting thing is, I was 18 months sober, and she was 6 months out of the convent. So, so we became the drunk and the nun, right? I had bad credit; she had no credit, and neither of us knew how to live life for opposite reasons.
Oh wow!
And so early on, because I was open just to spirituality and God, and I started going to church with her. And at some point when it was getting serious, I surrendered, and started really attending, and ended up getting into RCIA, and then we got married and went through and became Catholic, and it was very special.
When were you received into the church?
I think it was 2002.
Okay.
In Goleta at St. Raphael's in Goleta, California.
Nice. And how did you end up in Arizona?
We when we got married, we were about 40 years old, and neither of us had any savings, any money, again, for opposite reasons. So, we diligently started trying to put together retirement. We realized living in the Santa Barbara area that we weren't going to be able to save for retirement. So we were scouting it out, and my company at the time had an office in Tempe, Arizona. And so I went on a trip there, and I came back. I said, we could live there. And then they have a Catholic school downtown, St. Mary's, and And then she looked it up, and she had met the Dominican Sisters of Ann Arbor while she was getting her master's degree in Steubenville.
Got it.
And she fell in
Okay,
love with
yeah.
them because they're just a real strong order, growing, wearing the habit, which her order had kind of really not been following the practices, and it was really attractive to her. And so, we thought about it for about 6 months, and we had adopted a daughter out of the foster system, Janet, when she was 10. And as soon as the adoption went through, then we could leave the state. And 3 months
Oh
later,
wow,
God,
we moved to Scottsdale. So quite a journey. God has a plan, and
I
that's
know.
beautiful.
we just keep showing up and seeing what he's got for us.
That's amazing. I think that's one of the things that I really admire about you. How much um, surrender and holy detachment you have in the time that that we've had fellowship together, and we did Exodus 90 together. I don't remember, did 1 year, 2 years,
I did, I think, 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years. That it was just such a beautiful witness to hear from you, like how you live your life, but if today, like what we wanted to ask you is kind of like guide us through like the 12 steps, because from what I was able to find, AA kind of started like in a meeting of two people in 1935 in Akron, Ohio.
All right.
I think it was Bill Wilson, he was a stockbroker, and Dr. Bob Smith, who was a surgeon. Um, and both of them were alcoholics. And one of them was they were both members of like the Oxford group, which, if I remember correctly, was a Lutheran ministry um, that helped people with to recover from alcoholism. Um, the part that I found interesting about how it was born, because I thought that it was Catholic, but it's actually Christian. But they talk about how alcoholism is a malady of mind, emotions, and body. And the 12 steps came from like a mixture of like the Oxford group and whatever experience Bill Wilson had. But if you
Right.
can expand on that, or what was your experience that you were like, I really need to do something with my life in order to just be
Yeah,
functional.
sure. So, from a very early age, junior high, high school, once I started drinking and using drugs, it was no middle ground. I was just off and running, and I was always drinking for effect. And for a while, you can hold it together. And came from a very nice family, but we didn't deal with emotions or spirituality. So I was involved in a Protestant church, and actually got involved because I had this spiritual seeking, this thirst, but I didn't know how to solve it. A lot of times, I think I solved it with drugs and alcohol. That's
Mm.
why they call it spirits. Because you have this false sense of connection. And so my whole family turned out to be alcoholics, and I was the last one to get sober. And my mother kind of died of an illness, but kind of alcohol related. So when I finally got sober, and it took me a while, I went in and out. Then I really just dove head first, and the 12 steps are the Oxford group. They had 6 steps, which was Protestant. But it's similar to Saint Ignatius spiritual exercises.
Okay.
The process of uncovering and discarding all our humanness, our sins and our defects and our resentments and fears is universal.
Okay.
And so when Dr. Bob and Bill met, they found that the key thing was it was one alcoholic helping another.
Mm.
So
Okay.
you stay sober by helping other people. And they started helping each other. Then they started going to sanitariums, really mental hospitals that treated alcoholism. And back then, in the late 30s, and this is depression, so the
Mm.
country was hitting a bottom, and then here
Totally.
they are hitting a spiritual bottom with a disease that ties in with alcohol or drugs. Um, they they would go to these hospitals and say, hey, we want to talk to people. This is going to keep us sober. And so the doctors would let them, because if you were an alcoholic, you were just sentenced to death. You would eventually go crazy, and you'd get, your mind would go, or you'd just die of whatever different diseases, liver disease and things like that. So they started going in and having success. And there are some Catholic roots in AA, early AA. So in the Dr. Bob, the hospital he worked with, there was a nun, Sister Ignatia, and it was
Okay.
St. Thomas Hospital. And so she caught on and was starting to help them, and they had an alcohol wing where they would bring people, and she became in charge of that. And so she was very instrumental in that, and would pray with them and do that sort of thing. And so they started to have success. And then they took that steps. They had the 6, and Bill, he tells the story that he actually just had an inspiration, probably divine inspiration, one night, that he took this 6 steps on a napkin and made it into 12.
Nice.
And so then they socialized that among the groups, and they kind of refined it. It was an interesting process. So one of the guys, I forget his name, but he was the atheist in New York. And so it was very Christian approach. And he kind of argued against that. And so they changed the language, because a lot of people that are sober, and I know people here, they were harmed by people in the name of God. They were using Christianity or whatever religion and telling them things that weren't true, but they hurt them as children, and so they're really harmed that way. So the first step is we admitted we're powerless over alcohol, that our life had become unmanageable. You have to, that you just have to stop drinking. But the root of that is that my thoughts and my emotions are unmanageable. And even what we call normies. So you guys might be normies. We still have similar things, and but then the second step is where the atheists impacted came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So I think that was one of the miracles of the program, that it got people in the door and let them decide what that higher power was. And then once they're sober and they're working in the spiritual program, God finds them. He gives them what they need. And that was the same true for me. And
it sounds like you. I was telling my wife today, actually, it's like you cannot change someone that doesn't want to change. There has to be this desire in a person to change. Like, I have to admit that there is a problem. Like, my clothes don't fit, which is like the problem that I'm facing right now. Like, I need to do something about it. I need to either eat less and exercise more and make better choices with food, but I need to face that and this is my reality. Accept that. I'm assuming that you can apply that to almost anything, but specifically with something that it is affecting your life in that way, like substance abuse.
We have a phrase in one of the literature. It says, "Pain is the touchstone of all growth." And even if you look at Catholic saints, like Saint Francis or Saint Augustine, they were party people. And then something, they hit some sort of a bottom or some sort of conversion point where it's bad enough and you wake up and you're able to see things in a different light and have a willingness to do different actions.
Wow. Never thought about it like that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the third step is to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So this is like, there's a lot of surrender from what I've seen in the 12 steps.
It's for everybody too. So, when I'm out there drinking, I'm kind of self-will run riot. I'm the director in charge of my life and the world, and I'm trying to rearrange everything just the way I want it. And then once you adopt this new attitude, I start to look and think, oh, I'm not in charge. I can have goals and try to do things, but I need to pray and align with God, and get some direction, and find out really what He wants for me to do.
Yeah, I think coming back to the second one real quick, when it says power greater than ourselves, there's a void, right? In terms of something fills that void, whether it's alcohol, whether it's food, whether it's too much fun of any kind, right?
Work.
The pleasure,
Work,
yeah, the
yeah.
pleasure. Sometimes work becomes a meaningful distraction for people that are missing something.
Right.
But there's that letting go and acknowledging that you are not the center, right? So it's the power greater than ourselves, the important part, because that's, I believe, the void that you're trying to fill is pretty much the void that God needs to fill.
Yeah.
uh, if you are a Christian, a Catholic. But even if you're not, an atheist that's an alcoholic, still there's a gap. There's a gap that they're trying to fill with whatever pleasure, whether it be for numbing or whether it be just to pass it by. But it kind of goes well into the third, right? That it just says is the will uh, to let God take care of our lives,
Yeah.
So that's super interesting.
And it can be long term, but really it could be moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I have these thinking and feeling habits. I'm hardwired. When we were studying to be foster parents, the trauma pre-birth and year 1 and 2, even if you're good parents, if there's upset or anger in the household or something going on in your mother, even when you're a womb, you put up these defenses, or you create these tools for a living, that help protect us from that. And then when we get later in step 6 and 7, we find out that those are defects or shortcomings or sins, as we call them in the Catholic Church.
But you're right. I mean, that's a survival instinct more than anything. When you're young, you don't know how to address it.
Right.
But if you take those insecurities and those issues later in life, then that's where, as you become more aware, then you're like, oh, I can use this. Oh, I can use that. You start picking up crutches along the way that don't necessarily help you better your situation, but in turn, it just makes it even worse.
Yeah.
I think it's both horrible and amazing to know yourself.
Yeah, totally is.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, this is why I am this way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we like to say that the whole world needs a 12-step program, especially right now with all the craziness.
Oh, absolutely.
Just the lack of God in society is amazing.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. And and the drugs and alcohol today with fentanyl and things that are coming across the border, it's an epidemic of people dying from drug overdose and alcoholism. Mm-hmm. It's really affecting, someone. I was in an AA meeting this morning and she lost 3 friends in the last week.
Jeez.
Wow.
To drug overdose. So this is serious. This is life and death stuff, that if
daily,
we don't,
right? On a daily basis.
On a daily basis. So, we have to get that, and then that's our motivation to do the work on ourselves, because it's uncomfortable, it's scary, facing our fears, but we get that courage because we've got God with us, a higher power that we can learn to carry with that and walk through this tough process.
Let me ask you a question, Randy, maybe a little off topic, but what's your thought on harm reduction programs? Because I've heard that it's. Do you know about those?
Mm-mm.
So harm reduction programs are when literally the government provides safe and accessible ways for people to use, but with a mindset of keeping them alive until they get clean. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think it's just enabling them. It's pacifying, it's quieting them. It's not a solution.
Correct.
I
just wanted to get your perspective, because I've had mixed reviews, and I worked recently on something related to that as advertising goes, and I was just like, well, this kind of doesn't make sense.
No,
it's like giving a kid a bunch of cookies and saying you're gonna get really fit eventually.
Yeah, It's
Not
like I
good.
went to a conference in June in San Francisco, and there's people laying on the streets with needles in their arms, and smoking, and they're homeless, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a center right over there that's giving them that stuff.
Jeez,
So,
that's
for
brutal.
me, I mean, I've had friends die, had one recently die. This is a deadly disease. If you don't do this, it'll get you in a lot of silly ways. It may not say alcoholism or drug addiction, but
Mm-hmm.
this guy who was drunk, he was in a rehab. He got mad at them. He left, went into a hotel, got drunk, and fell and hit his head in the shower.
Ish.
So, it can catch you. So the hard step, the first hard step, so 1, 2, and 3, I mean, we always want to work that, and I'll come back to that with meditation, but the fourth step, made a moral inventory of ourselves, is making a list of all the resentments that we have,
Mm.
and taking a look. And we it's like 5 columns. We write the resentment, and then we write, what the person or the thing, could be an institution, and
Mm-hmm.
I usually say, okay, what about the church? Because there may be, or God. I had a resentment
Mm-hmm.
against God when I started getting sober. So you have to look at that. And then, so you have this list, and some can be pretty long, and what they did to you, and then how that affected you. So now you're having to self-reflect. Okay, and how that affected you, and there you give 5 choices, and it's pretty simple: fear, it's security, esteem, and some things like that. And then the 5th column is what's your part in it. Because
Mm.
I don't have a resentment against someone. If I do, I probably harmed them in the same way. I probably interacted with them. So rather, that old adage, if you're pointing a finger at somebody, there's 3 pointing back at you. So it kind of boomerangs it back, and lets you really think about that. And it's just
Mm.
like an inventory. It's just like, hey, write it down. You don't have to relive it. It's just like being
Yeah.
in a store taking inventory, and it's wonderful to help people do that. So after you're sober for a little while, then you get to help other people. You sponsor them or mentor them
Mm-hmm.
through the process, and it's a real gift is to see that come about. And then the 5th step is sharing that with somebody. So some of these things, people, it's like confession, really, but they've kept
Mm-hmm.
these secrets, and a secret is like a cancer on my soul. I
Yeah.
went in and out for 5 years and lied about my drinking. I would pretend to be sober, and it just ate me up.
Mm.
And so we have to open that up. And my wife, Lucy, she once likened it to, if I have a wound or a cut, I have to take the bandage off and let air get to it. So I have to expose it and share it. So let that sunlight of the spirit, let God heal it
Yes.
and get it out in the open. Because if I just keep it closed up, it's just going to fester and comes out in all kinds of weird ways.
Yeah. We can't hear you, Walter, for some reason.
I hit the mute button on my physical microphone.
I'm
Can you
sure
hear
it
me
was
now?
very profound what you were saying.
Yeah.
I was just doing all sorts of like and yeah, and I'm familiar with you. When I when I was listening to you talk about the 4th and 5th step, when you said about Ignatian spirituality, that made me think of the general confession that some people go through when they're doing their directed spiritual exercises. Um, so I can see I pick up what you're putting down. Um, okay, so the 4th step is the difficult one, and I love that moral inventory. By the way, I feel like like you said, everybody should do it
Mm-hmm.
because it could probably start the healing of the person way faster. Like something like that. I um I feel like in spiritual direction, my spiritual director has challenged me to like look at what causes me to act in a certain way, um, and bring it to God and bring it out in the open. And you said something that thought it was interesting, that you don't have to relive it, and it might just be my personality, but I feel like I relive the hurt from whatever I'm bringing up in prayer. So I guess it's just more for like me, but like, how do you not relive something when you're going through a modal inventory?
Well, it's a spiritual concept called detachment.
Hmm.
So you have to learn to detach from that. And resentments are those, resentment we like to say is like taking poison and hoping the other person dies.
Yeah.
The other person may not know about this feeling that I have, but I'm carrying it around with me for 20 years.
Oh boy.
And so why don't I can give it to God and let it go, get it out into the sunlight of the Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and give it to God and let it be healed. So
Mm.
part of it, when and is with meditation, that we practice this detachment
Okay.
from our thoughts. And when we get to the 11th step, maybe I'll go into more about that,
Sure.
which is
All
the
right.
meditation step.
Well, let's move into the sixth step. We're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. So we have to admit that we have defects, that we have sin. Um, that takes humility, and that is an obstacle to some people, myself included, for sure. Um, and then 7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. Man, this is so good. Um, let's move. Should we keep going, or do you want to make comment in any of these two?
Just real quick about that. So for me, I mean, if you ask a priest, that's what people are confessing mostly, is 6 and 7. And I think we generally have 3 or 4 that are recurring.
Yeah.
And Bill Wilson, when he was doing the steps, the first one, 6, says defects. They took away sin because people kind of have a resentment against the word.
Yeah.
And so then he did next one shortcomings, and it read it in a book. He just didn't want to use the same term twice. So in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the text which they wrote, it's really only covered in 2 paragraphs. Okay, now that we did that, we're moving on. But they wrote the big book 3 years after they started, so they hadn't really dug in. So for me, after 24 years of sobriety, the work mostly is about step 6 and 7. How do I lessen my defects? The power over them, and it's really things I'm worshiping. So like food, you mentioned it, and my phone, where am
Yeah.
I putting my energy and my thoughts, and when I'm not with God, and that's causing problems in my life.
It's like idol hunting, step 6 and 7.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and some of our defects and our sins, I kind of like them. I mean, they're my friends until I realized that they were bad, and some of them I'm kind of holding on to. I've heard a phrase, I didn't never let go of anything that doesn't have claw marks. So,
oh man,
Well,
so true.
when the shortcomings are removed too, I mean, you're opening up room for virtue to grow.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to clean the closet before you put like a couple of new shirts in there.
Right.
Because I think you're moving through these steps. It's a cleansing of sorts. Am I correct in saying that? So that's what it sounds like, in terms of asking God to humbly remove the shortcomings. Something else is going to replace it. Something better.
Yeah,
and hopefully you replace it with something better, right?
Yeah, a lot of times
That's
when I work with people, these are my defects, but what's the opposite? What's the virtue? What's the positive quality? And then because God is so intertwined in these, that's where the grace comes in. Sometimes God, I can't do it. I need that help. I need that gift that I don't deserve of grace to be released of that. And when I hit that bottom on a defect, even in sobriety, I've had bottoms, emotional bottoms. When you hit that spot and you finally let go, and then grace can come in, God can come in and help heal me from that.
I think
Beautiful.
that's a very important distinction, that it's not us that need to do all the work, but sometimes we just need to get out of the way
Hmm.
and let
Oh,
God.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Step 8 sounds very difficult. Make a list of all persons that we harmed and become willing to make amends to them all.
Yeah, it is. And what I've found is that most of the people that I've harmed are on my resentment list. So,
Huh.
we usually start there because if I'm angry at them, they didn't do something that I thought they should do, and so I probably had an interaction or I did something that harmed them. It's making the list and asking God to help with that, because the ninth step is where you actually go out and you make those amends.
Mm.
You talk to the people and you don't say I'm sorry, because I don't know, as an alcoholic I said I'm sorry a lot of times, and that's not making amends. Amends is repairing
Okay.
the relationship, repairing my behavior that caused that harm.
Hmm.
Okay. That was
Yeah.
going to be like one of my questions. Like, sorry, go ahead, Gustavo.
Yeah. I mean, you saying you're sorry, it literally makes the person saying they're sorry feel better. But
Yeah,
actually making amends is taking the other person into consideration and working towards rebuilding what was broken.
right. Yeah, and I coach I have a young man that's doing his amends step now, his ninth step, and we kind of script it because you're nervous,
Hmm.
and
Mm.
it's I apologize for my behavior in this, and this is what I did, and I am sorry that I hurt you, and and you just leave it at that, and then the forgiveness part, they may forgive you or not, but the amends is doing right action after that, not doing that again.
So, even if you offer an apology to someone that you hurt, you run the risk of them saying like, "I don't accept your apology,"
Yeah.
right? But that doesn't mean that you didn't do your part. Like, if that other person chooses to not forgive, would you say that, well, that making amends, you already tried, you're not doing the behavior again? And sometimes, some people, like, they just drift away from your life, or they come in and out of your life, and
Yeah.
just doing that trying to do the amend to repair the relationship, would that be like, does it count?
Like, I don't know what.
Does it count towards
Oh, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot written in the big book. That's what we call the book, called Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a lot written about that, and you're healing yourself. You're trying to make amends, but in some ways, we're all spiritually sick.
mm,
But if we go back to step 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. For me, the insanity is thinking that I'm separate and alone, that God isn't in
mm,
my life, that I'm not
Hmm.
interconnected with all of humanity and all the world in some spiritual and divine way. And so then I create these defects of character, and I harm people because I'm selfish. I'm running the world and I'm just doing whatever I want to do, and I'm running over people. And now I need to clean that up. But some of these people, they may not be on the same spiritual path.
Hmm.
They,
yeah.
you know,
That's funny. Solanus Casey, blessed Solanus Casey, used to think that it was unfathomable that someone would consider that God doesn't exist. But again, he was living in the 1800s, so there are other times, and now, like what you just said, like just made me think about like the rise of narcissism and how people are their own gods and just
Hmm.
making their own rules, doing
yeah.
and undoing.
And
Oh
part
boy.
of part of what we do is, if you can't make the amends or the repair, is what we call living amends.
Hmm.
So I harmed people that I can't even remember their name. I don't know where they are. People I dated. It would do harm to seek them out and make an apology, because I'm married and they're married. And so
Right.
how do I do that? And one of my ways for living amends, was as I was learning to meditate, I actually went into a women's recovery home and was teaching them how to meditate. So I
Oh
can't
wow.
apologize to people, but
Directly.
I can go in and help them in
Hmm.
honor of that.
And
You know, it's kind of
That
like
person.
I
that's
guess
beautiful.
penance. Penance
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
the Catholic term for that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that started me off on a whole other path.
Wow, that's great. Um, yeah, I think I don't know. It's just like maybe I've been doing like bits and pieces of the 12 steps and I didn't even know about it because like offering sacrifice for others that I've heard in the past is definitely something that has crossed my mind uh, since my reversion to the faith. Um, but let's keep going to step 10 is continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong promptly admitted it. It seems like it's just like maintenance, right? Just keep going.
It is. It's working all the steps every day, you know, and after doing this a little while, the steps become the road signs in my life. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
here, you know, here's a four step, you know, I just got a resentment. I need to repair that, you know, either right away or when you do your nightly review,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great Catholic practice. Then you can see that and you can correct it or apologize or whatever. And so just the steps. So I took that situation back, you know, from God. I need to turn it over. Or here's this defect. I shouldn't have eaten all that ice cream.
Is a pint is not a serving? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, so how do we make this part of our life? It's a
Okay.
design for living and a spiritual way to live. You know that, and there's plenty of Catholics. I mean, the first meeting that I went to at St. Raphael's in Goleta, California,
Mm-hmm.
um, was started by a priest because
Okay.
he needed to get sober. So
Huh.
he started a
Interesting.
meeting there in his church.
Wow.
That's great. Um, okay, let's jump into step 11, which is where I think the meditation part comes in. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscience contact with God, as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Um, that seems like Catholic discernment of spirits, just pure and simple,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah, but I think it's more conscious because you know that we always say prayer and meditation. So
Hmm.
in the 12 steps and 12 traditions, which is a more expansion on each of the steps, it says that the you know our sobriety and spiritual life is based on three things: self-examination, prayer, and meditation.
Okay.
It's like a three-legged stool. If I'm just leaning on one or two of them and not doing all three, I'm kind of off balance. I'm off kilter. And early on, when I was in college, I stopped drinking for on purpose for a little while. I'm not quite sure why. I was enjoying it, and I started doing meditation. You know, it was kind of affirmations as repeating them over and over. And this is really cool. I really got spiritually connected. And then I started drinking and using drugs again, and I realized it didn't work. Meditation when I was high or drunk. So like mental note to self, you know, next time
Hmm.
you're sober, you should really get into this. So flash forward, you know, like 25 years later, when I got sober, I got active and in meditating and learning, and in my spiritual journeys, I learned, you know, a lot of different meditation techniques and things like that. And so I was meditating, and they have 11-step meditation meetings where you go meditate as a group, and
Hmm.
they're all different formats. And and before I had met my wife, I mouthed off to somebody in Santa Barbara, well, we should teach new people. It's step 11. That's kind of an advanced step, but
Hmm.
new people in sobriety could learn to meditate. They may not have the conscious contact, I think, which is the
Right.
advanced part of that step, but it'll help them along every way. So I
Hmm.
mouthed off to this guy and I said, we should teach our newcomers how to meditate. He goes, that's a great idea. Why don't you come teach my newcomers how to meditate? And he ran the substance treatment program in the Santa Barbara County Jail. So,
Oh wow.
so I ended up going there every week for 4 years.
Wow.
and I learned how to. There wasn't any books. Or I wanted to learn how to I had this idea how to meditate with each step, and I could design, or there were techniques or things that you could do to enhance that step while you're working doing the outside work. And there was nothing there. If there was, I would have plagiarized it. I would have used it and announced it, but it wasn't. So I actually developed a course, a 12-week course,
Wow.
how to meditate with each of the steps. And they would cycle me through the medium security and the honor farms, the men and women, just kind of moving around for 4 years.
That's
And
That's awesome.
amazing.
it was
Where can we get
pretty
that
amazing.
course, by the way? You have it on
I have some of it written very poorly on 11thstepmeditation.org. I actually
Oh wow.
started it. It takes a lot of work. I think when I retire, that will be my retired job. Actually kind of put more of a course together.
so
But
stay tuned, guys.
stay tuned. But the interesting thing is, then I got busy with work and I was traveling, and this counselor that was in the jail, she kept calling me, Randy, there's guys that were here and they're back in jail and they want, they remember your meditation. They want you to come back. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And she finally said, well, can you just put it on a CD? So this is how God works, right? From doing a living amends to at a women's recovery home to someone saying, after doing it for 4 years in the jail, put it on a CD. So I went into a recording studio in Santa Barbara, put it on a CD, and it ended up being sold by Hazelton, which is the largest, you know, recovery book, and they have hospitals. They now own Betty Ford. So back when CDs were a thing.
I mean, it's on Spotify,
It's on
right?
Spotify. Spirit Step, yeah, Spirit Step
Wow.
1. So I did 1 and 2, and
Nice.
but when I met Lucy and started going to the Catholic Church, I was so excited to learn that Catholics meditate. I mean, didn't really hear people talking about it a lot,
Right.
but then I got into the mystics, and I realized that prayer in Aramaic, meant resting in divine presence. It's not talking to God. It's not saying all this stuff. Jesus didn't go out all night and talk to God. He probably just went out and was in the presence. And
Yeah.
the
I mean,
Desert Fathers and all of them, that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
it's definitely an art for sure. Something that are you familiar with Hallow, the app?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um that's what I've been using for the last maybe year and a half to try to meditate. I have to be honest with you, I fall asleep when I try to meditate. I don't know if like
Yeah.
that's like a byproduct of meditation, or I'm just like a very like a newbie when it comes to that. But I should probably like.
Well, I think when we meditate, God gives us what we need. So I would guess you're doing that in the evening.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
And as a
Hmm.
society, we don't get enough sleep.
Yeah,
Um,
I do it with my head on the pillow with the covers all the way up to my neck. So maybe not the best posture to meditate.
Reverse that. Wake up a half hour early and do that in the morning
Mm,
before your family gets up, because you guys have
mm.
kids. I mean, it's hard to, you got to
There's
kind of
that
get
too.
ahead of it. But there's a couple strategies that we can do, you know, and you can apply it to a prayer, the Lord's Prayer, or you could apply it to the Rosary, or just a scripture, be still and know that I am God, that whole thing. And it's one, uh, uh, when we're not trained in meditation, using something to repeat over and over gives us something to focus on. As a society, I would say, broad generalization, we're all a little bit ADD. We're so distracted. So if we focus on
Yeah.
a line of a prayer or the rosary and do it really slow, then that'll give us a focal point. And two, knowing that the first step, that our thoughts and our emotions are unmanageable. When I get distracted, I'm doing my meditation and I'm thinking about earlier today, or I'm planning tomorrow. Like, no,
Yeah.
this is God's time. And so you notice that and you bring yourself back to the center. And and then you do that again, and then you get distracted again. So
Mhm.
this one priest was teaching a meditation course, and the nun said, "Oh, Father, I had to bring my meditation back to God 1,000 times during that 20 minutes." He goes, "Bless you, God. You got to, bless you, sister. You got to reaffirm your, your willingness to be with God 1,000 times." So
sounds like my holy hour.
well, and it's practice. It's practice, and even a lot of times I just do the rosary really slow, and I visualize, whatever that mystery is, and sometimes it takes me an hour and a half to do a rosary. If I wake up at 4 in the morning and I can sit through it, and using all those techniques, bringing it back. And you can imagine that your thoughts are floating in the wind like a leaf or down, a stick in a stream, just kind of floating down. Do that visualization so you can see them, but you don't have to reach out and grab them.
Yeah.
And we can do that in Mass. How many times have I said the Our Father, but I'm thinking about something else while I'm saying it?
Yeah, totally.
How do I make it more intentional?
Oh, intentional. I like that word. All right. For the interest of time, let's move on to the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I think that's the part that you mentioned about you stay sober by helping others.
Right.
And I think that the part that I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that you went to a meeting this morning, is it like a requirement, or you go to meetings as you need them? How does that, is it up to everybody, it's a discretion of every single person that goes through the 12-step program?
I still go to 3 or 4 meetings a week. One, I need to keep it fresh. Some people will say, "Well, how often did you drink?" Well, I drink every day. Well, maybe you should go to a meeting every day. And there's hundreds and thousands of meetings everywhere. And it's kind of like church, or the holy hour. Are you going to go once a week? Or are you going to go to daily Mass, or do that sometimes? But it's really about giving it away, being of service. I've had a transformation. That's what God does for us. He transforms us into different beings by working all those steps. And we do that in the Catholic Church too. We're there to improve ourselves and to be better and to help other people and to take it out, not just to do it for ourselves. And you guys do it with this podcast. You are, bringing the message to people all over. Just by what you do. It takes time and effort. No, you're carrying the message. And I think as Catholics, I hear this, but we could do this a little better, more proactively. And so I always, in meetings, I let everybody know that I'm Catholic. And then some people avoid me, and but then there's always the meeting before the meeting and the meeting where we just share and we have a topic and we just let people share. And some of it's like just talking about and formulating ideas and then listening to other people. Then there's the meeting after the meeting. So it's kind of like church, when you go to Mass, you meet people. Usually you're getting in there because you want to get focused and participate in the Mass. But afterwards, I always like to stay afterwards and meet people and find out what's going on with them and see how they can help. How
relate,
you can help them.
Right? Create relationships.
Yeah.
And I think we strive for that in all of our lives. You mentioned coming out of Mass, and or we're looking to make a human connection,
right,
because we need each other. We were not made. Adam was just not left alone to his devices. He got a companion, and we are a community people. So it's very important, and we strive to grow our communities and to make our communities safer. So I really appreciate and I'm very grateful for your ministry and your service that you do, because you are being that community, you're being that support for somebody that otherwise wouldn't have it, maybe, or would seek it out in the negative space, which then leads 2 people, 3 people down a very black hole. So
Right.
it's very powerful what you do, and I I will pray that you continue to do that. In
Thank
terms
you.
of bringing more people uh, to realize how much more potential they have.
Absolutely. And I think what I've learned is, the story about Martha and Mary. It's finding a balance. How do
Yep.
I adore Christ while I'm doing the work of the work that needs to be done?
Totally. Hmm.
And how can I bring Mary into the work?
Hmm.
And do it really mindfully, intentionally, and slowly, and try to stay focused. So I'm a work in progress. I'm not even close there, but
We all are. We
We're all in
all
the
are.
same boat.
Yeah, we
Um,
all are.
so, lastly, I would ask you, like, if someone is listening right now and is looking for help, what would you recommend them to do, like today, in order to begin their journey towards recovery?
Yeah, I would go online, and there are AA central offices in every city,
Okay.
and call them, and they'll have someone come talk to you.
Perfect.
Nice.
And there's apps. The meeting guide is a chair, like a folding chair. It's an app called Meeting Guide, put out by AA. So when I travel, I do that, but call AA. And chances are there's people, because this is an epidemic. There's people in your life that you know already. Ask them, and they may have already talked to you, but maybe you're
Hmm.
ready to listen. Maybe we're ready to get into action.
That's
That's
awesome.
amazing. Well, Randy, thank you so much for your time. This conversation has been so interesting,
Yeah,
and I mean, I got a lot out of it that makes me
for
want to
sure.
just like do the 12 steps daily, just to have like that mindfulness and meditation. All those things sound amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
And thank
And
you
that
and
for the
intentionality too,
opportunity.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
intentionality as well. Um, so say again the name of the meditation album that you have on Spotify. What's the name of it?
Yeah, it's a Spirit Step by
Spirit Step.
Randy F. And there's
Randy F.
Spirit Step 1. So there's a talk about the first step, and then 2 guided meditations, and then for Spirit Step 2, there's a talk about the second step. And so you get some coaching, some information, and then you get to practice applying it. And then there's other meditations online and in YouTube under 11thstepmeditation.org.
11thstepmeditation.org. We'll
Is
put
that
the
number
link in
11
the
or word 11?
Number 11.
Okay.
we'll put links to all of that stuff in the description of the episode. But once again, thank you so much. God bless
Awesome.
you. It was nice talking to you after a little while that we haven't seen each other. And for everybody else, if you liked this episode, got something out of it, you know what to do. Hit like, subscribe, rate, review. Go to direct.me/Fahrbach for more information on the podcast. And we'll see you next week.
Awesome.
Thanks for
Thanks a lot,
watching and
gentlemen.
listening.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Randy. God bless.